Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm very excited for today's video. This is one of the videos I get most excited to film. Like at the beginning of the year, like I'm already excited to film this at the end of the year, and it is my year-end palette ranking where I'm ranking for you every single eyeshadow palette that I have tested and tried out for the first time in the year of 2024. So if you are interested, stay tuned. For those who have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content, palette themed content, or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. Okay, you guys, I'm gonna leave a timestamp on the screen and down below if you want to skip the little like housekeeping things that I have to talk to you about, but I have a few housekeeping things. First, what I want to get out of the way is that today is Vikings game day. About the time that this video goes live, it'll be kickoff time and the Vikings play the Packers today. It is a very important football game, so please chant Skull Vikings for me today. Second, I am so sorry, you guys. December has completely gotten away from me. I have quite a bit going on in my personal life as well, and I completely forgot to pick a winner for my giveaway. So I really apologize for that. Just want to be totally transparent with you. I completely just, that escaped me, and I finally pulled out like my paper planner the other day and like circled on December 13th was like giveaway ends. So I've reached out to someone this morning. As soon as they reach back out to me and I do have an official winner to send my giveaway stuff to, I will be getting that out in the mail. I am deeply sorry for just not being on top of it. I am so sorry. And then finally, I plan to film this video a little bit sooner, but I've been putting this off because of a very uncomfy topic, and that is the topic of Eyeshadow Rain, which is a brand that I have supported all year long on my channel. I have done dedicated palette reviews on at least, I can think of 2 palettes that they have released. I've spoken extremely highly of the brand's formula and just of the brand in general. I've talked about them being a top 2 eyeshadow like brand for me. So you guys have heard me say it, but unfortunately I just morally cannot, like I'm actually at a loss of words. I was thinking about it this morning as I was like getting ready to film this video, and I was getting more and more angry. Couple of things. Last year, Eyeshadow Rain was getting quite a bit of heat for using AI artwork, which essentially takes jobs away from actual artists. And the brand came out and said, like, we're listening, we hear you, we are going to like transition into hiring artists, and we're going to transition away from AI artwork. Well, then they just, all excited, la-di-da, announced their like Wolf Moon. There's 2 palettes that they were coming out with. And it's just so clear that it's AI artwork. And I'm not even an artist. I'm not even an artist. But what bothers me most about this situation is, what bothers me most just in life at this point of where I'm at in life, what I personally have experienced, what bothers me is when someone's words don't match their actions, because you've wasted my time with your words. You've wasted your time and your breath with words that aren't true. Your actions need to match your words. So there's that. And then even more disturbing are some of the Instagram posts that this brand has interacted with on their brand page. And maybe part of me is just baffled, because I was a PR major, but I'm just like, on your brand page, like, not saying any of the interactions were right regardless, but on your brand's page, you're singling out a community that purchases from you, You're singling them out in such a disgusting way. And just, I'm a parent, so coming from like a parental lens, bullying of any kind, being unkind in any way is just, it's not okay in my books. It is not okay. I think about like my own child, and if someone were to like single her out in any way, or just no. I will link some Instagram posts or an Instagram account that talks more about this in the description box down below, but I'm just deeply disturbed. And I will sit here all day and make, you know, be blunt and be honest, like, oh, ha ha ha, like this sucks and I think it sucks. But I will not bully a person, a community of people. I will not do that. For any of you that want to comment like, oh, it's just makeup, like blah, 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 then the brand should be leaving things to just makeup. Do you get what I mean? Then the brand should not be interacting with the things that they're interacting with. I feel like it's really simple. And so I am always going to be a person that comes from a place of support, loving of everyone, no matter what, unless you're a bully or a mean person or just have a bad heart. You know, toxic men, not allowed. Not to like actually make things lighthearted. What I'm trying to get at is I will not be ranking the like 11 palettes that I tried from Endlessly Rain this year. I have asked the brand to remove my code, and I am not at all comfortable supporting the brand or even really talking about the brand on my channel beyond this point. I won't be ranking my Endlessly Rain palettes, so if you're wondering, that's why. And I won't be talking about the brand on my channel for the foreseeable future. I don't believe in fully canceling, but I also don't really know how a brand comes back from something like this. Personally, I don't know. Especially considering like there's already been like history in the past of them saying like, oh, like we hear, see, and understand you, and then like being like, but we don't care. We're not actually gonna like do the things that we say. I'm really not trying to be mean. I really am not trying to be mean, and I am not the type of person that wants to like stir a pot in any way. Actually, that's probably not true, especially when it comes to sporting events. I'll stir a pot all day long, but I really was just thinking about it today and just getting so upset. Last housekeeping thing, on a lighter, more positive note, I will try and insert swatches of as many things as possible. I have gotten so behind. I feel like I enter every year being like, I am gonna nail it when it comes to being like a beauty YouTuber, and I'm gonna have all the swatches, I'm gonna have all the b-roll, I am gonna just like be on top of my game. And then January 3rd hits and I'm like, but I'm just like too tired to like inventory and swatch these things. And so I have swatches of a lot of these palettes, but like I said, it's Vikings game day and it is a very important game today. When kickoff happens, the most I'll be doing is like sweeping my floors or mopping my floors, because when I get stressed, I have to be like up and moving around and doing things. But I don't know if I'll be swatching eyeshadow palettes. So if there's some swatches missing, just know it's my goal to be better next year, but I still make no promises. That being said, let's get into the ranking. Starting at the very bottom, I think I have 51 eyeshadow palettes to rank for you. So starting at the very bottom, I have this Prada quad. They did send this to me. By the way, most of the palettes that I purchased, or that I'm ranking, I have purchased myself. The only ones that were sent to me, I will kind of say, because there's not that many, but this Prada quad, my Ultra Ego palettes, and then a couple of Kaleidos quads. Anyway, this Prada quad. First of all, I am not a huge fan of like I just like things to be like symmetrical and even. This color story doesn't necessarily speak to me with like the bright rosy pink, and I was a little bit surprised. All of these shadows are more of like a cream to powder formula. Kind of interesting. Didn't really love the one look that I created using this, and I was like, because it's a luxury product, costs a lot of money, I was like, no. This has nothing to do with the collaborators, but I just have to be so honest about my experience. I know a lot of other people have had different experiences, and sometimes I sit here and I wonder though. I sometimes wonder, I'm like, how am I the only one with like hard pan in my Oden's Eye palettes? But coming in at number 50, 49, and 48, I have, these are the last palettes I personally have purchased from Oden's Eye, because for the last year and a half, I've had issues with quality in every palette that I purchased from them, which is so disappointing because Oden's Eye used to be a favorite brand. But lately, I don't know. I don't know if they switched labs. I honestly don't know, but I've had so many issues specifically with the mattes. So my least favorite of the collection was the Spring Dragon eyeshadow palette. And I think the reason I was most frustrated with this one was because I got hard pan in the shade Flora, which is like, why are we getting hard pan in like a nude shadow? I will say I did do a look with this palette. Oh, one other housekeeping thing. Every palette, in order for me to like come on and rank and review, I have to have used every single shade in the palette at least one time. There are a couple that I didn't quite get to finishing my testing process, but I will let you know which palettes those are as we go along. With this one, I did a couple of like really simple monochromatic looks where I did like these two greens, or I did a look that was like these two purples, and I thought that was pretty. But I did also struggle with the shade Wood down here, like just a dark brown. I also don't really love the way that the dark brown mixed with some of the pastels, and overall the color story just didn't really work for me. It's not my preference, and the quality just was not there. Then I have the Earthwood palette, which I again did really struggle with some of the shadows in here, specifically the shade Petal and Leaves, some of the darker shadows. I will say, this is just, you know, not my perfect color story. It's also not my palette. I look at this and I'm like, I don't personally feel super creatively inspired. And I just, again, was so disappointed in the quality. So I actually am decluttering the Prada, these palettes, and a couple more that I'll point out as we go along. Or if you want to catch my palette decluttered, I'll link that below. The Mighty Monster was my favorite of the bunch. I actually am keeping the Mighty Monster. I did really enjoy all of the like special shades in this palette. In fact, all summer long, I kept like thinking about the shade Midgard Gleam, and would reach into this palette just for that shade. I did really struggle with the orange and the red just not being super pigmented. I didn't necessarily get hard pan in those, but I did struggle with those. Also the purple and the green. So the majority of the mattes in here were a bit of a struggle, but I did really enjoy the metallic shadows in here. I thought they were really pretty. So this one is staying in my collection. Okay, this one I haven't fully completed my testing process, so that's why this one's ranking a little bit lower. I'm not decluttering this by any means, but at this moment, I just didn't feel comfortable ranking it much higher. I have only reached into this palette one time. The shadows that I reached for were these three across the top, and then I also did reach for this shade right here and this shade right here. This is from It's Belle Cosmetics. It's Under the Full Moon. I don't think that It's Belle Cosmetics is a brand anymore, which makes me really sad. My complaint with this palette is I thought that the mattes were pretty hard pressed and just not super pigmented. Not saying every matte shadow has to be the most pigmented thing ever, but I just thought they were a bit hard pressed. The shade Full Moon is such a stunning like silver blue shade though. I would want to keep this palette for that shade alone. I also thought that the shade Moonglade was stunning, and then this shade up here is, the name of this shade is August 1st, which is my daughter's birthday, so I feel like this palette is like special to me in that regard, but I wasn't super impressed with the mattes in this palette. Next I have the Diverune Cosmetics, oh I forget what this one was called, the Moth and the Moon. Okay, with Diverune, their shimmer and metallic formula is so impactful, so punchy, and so special, but they, in my opinion, have a lot of work to do with their mattes. This shade crumbled and I had to repress it. That's why there's a pan there. I was not uber impressed with really any of the mattes in this palette. I do like this purple down here. I thought that all of the metallics were really pretty. I will say like this green here, I have better greens, and there was nothing really special about that, but I love this shadow right here. I think this purple is really pretty. This orange also, like a fiery red orange, so beautiful in the summertime. Ultimately though, I just feel like I have a lot of other special palettes in my collection, and so I did end up decluttering this one, so I will be getting rid of this after filming this video. And then right after that, I have the Diverune Gloomy Gardens. And when I first tested this palette, the first look that I created with this, I absolutely loved. I did a look using this shadow right here, deepened it up with this, and then I used, I believe it was this shadow all over the lid. And this on the lid is one of the most like metallic holographic shades I've ever used. I was blown away by it, so I was like, oh my gosh, this might be one of my favorite palettes of the year. But as I went on to play around with this, the mattes just not very good. I don't love shadows like this in general. So those two shadows, I was like, I don't really know what to do with this. I was having to build and build and build when I was using these two shades, and then these were just like, had so much kick up. I just feel like there is some work that Diverune has to do on their mattes before I'm completely sold. And ultimately, I did decide to declutter this palette as well. After that, I have the NARS Afterglow Irresistible. This is not a formula thing at all for me. This is a color story thing. I just prefer like a either cool tone brown, neutral brown, or warm brown look. I don't necessarily love a rosy look. I just prefer anything but rosy basically. So I shouldn't have bought this. I have had this high regard for NARS eyeshadows since I tried the Summer Solstice palette, and I just keep buying every NARS palette to come out, and I stopped doing that and need to continue to stop doing that because not every color story is perfect for me, and I have so many other palette options to choose from. Like, I don't need to be cluttering up my makeup collection with palettes like this that are just, it's just a color story that I don't get excited to reach for. I don't find to be the most flattering on me, and I prefer other things. So this one I'm ranking, this is purely a color story thing. I do think NARS has a great eyeshadow formula. I love their lid topper shades. Next, I have the MAC Encrypted Kryptonite palette. I purchased this because I wanted the shade MAC Satin Taupe back in my life. This was my most used eyeshadow throughout all of high school and throughout all of college. I loved MAC Satin Taupe. I also had no idea what I was doing with makeup at all at that time. I will say I really enjoyed this little 6-pan, but it is pretty like lackluster. Like, it's kind of just like a basic cool tone palette with this fun like deep midnight satin sort of shade, which I think is really beautiful. I created one of my favorite looks of the year using this. However, it's not a super exciting color story. It's not something I'm going to be excited to reach for every single week by any means. So that's why I'm ranking this one in the bottom. Next, I have the Kaleidos. Oh my gosh, I have this one. This is the, I forget, and it's not on here. I forget what this one is called. Something Trap? Venus Trap? Venus Trap. This is pretty, but it's very cool toned. I do really love the metallic shade. It's very sparkly and intense on the eyes. It is a little bit like thicker packaging, but it is weighty. I mean, the packaging is pretty, but in terms of like storing it, I'm like, you know, it's fine. It's fine. It's just a quad. And then I have the Cold Brew quad, I believe. Still cool toned, but this is more like brown cool toned, where this has like the pink, but then it's more like grays. So I like this one just a little bit better. I think the quality in this is really good. In fact, I think when I think about trying to get more use out of my single eyeshadow collection, this would be a really good kind of companion palette, just because I can get like a good cool toned matte base. The quality of the mattes is really good, very easy to blend, but the reason this one's ranking lower is strictly because it is just a quad of cool tones plus one shimmer. Next up, this is strictly a color story thing for me. This just is not a color story that I look at and I'm like instantly like, okay, yes, I'm gonna do this, 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 and this. This is the Resurgence palette in collaboration with Heather Austin and Unearthly. And I think this totally makes sense to Heather and her makeup aesthetic, but her and I have completely different makeup aesthetics. I do love the shimmer shadows in here. I think Unearthly has a great shimmer and metallic formula. I will say I have had some hard pan on a few of the shades in here, but it doesn't impact the performance of the shadow for me. I've still gone in to use them after the hard pan, and the hard pan just quickly goes away. Nothing like the hard panning issues with my Odin's Eye palettes. But for me, I just look into this and I'm like, wait, what am I gonna, like, what am I doing? I always like to ground my looks personally with something a little bit neutral. I never just fully commit to color. So that's why this one is ranking lower. That one's strictly a color story thing. This one is strictly the fact that it is an all matte palette. This is the Bella Beauté Bar Melted Mattes palette. I am so happy to have this in my collection, but I always love to have like shimmers, but this will be great to pair with my single shadows as I try and get used out of single shadows. I also love neons. So honestly, this palette, like, I absolutely love. I just love things a little bit more, or things that I'm ranking above this are just a little bit more exciting, but this is such a staple to have. I mean, I love the matte browns up here, and then I have so many fun neon shadows to play with in the summertime. Bella Beauté Bar's matte formula is excellent in my opinion. I really enjoy their mattes. This would rank higher if it wasn't just an all matte palette. I'm really not trying to knock that palette. Next, I have the Lawless Dreamy Dozen 2, and this actually was sent to me by Lawless. I will say I've gone really hot and cold with the Lawless palettes. I've had some that I've really enjoyed. I've had some that I think are absolutely awful. So at first I was like, do I want to try this? Do I want to keep it? And then I looked inside and I was like, okay, this is like a very solid, just like neutral, warm leaning basic palette. I feel like this would be something very good for travel, especially like if I'm traveling for work, because like I can just go all matte, I can do a shimmer. Sometimes the Lala shimmers can be extremely metallic. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna give it a go. I'm gonna try it out. And I'm so glad that I did. Again, very basic. Like, do I have these in my collection already? Yes. But I feel like this palette is going to be perfect for work travel. I feel like this is perfect for work if I don't really want to think about my look and I don't want it to end up being like so over the top and so metallic and so punchy. This just kind of contains me. However, I will say the metallics are very punchy in this, and I actually am really impressed. The only reason that this one is ranking lower is just because it's not as exciting as some of the other things, but I think the quality of this is really, really good. Next, I have another Bella Beauty bar palette, and this is strictly a color story thing. This is the Dead Roses palette, and I knew going in this was not going to be my most reached for palette. I was really excited though about the idea of this like anti-Valentine's Day palette. I love Bella Beauty Bar's formula. I do have a code with Bella Beauty Bar, but I did purchase this palette on my own. My biggest thing with this one is, one, I don't reach for pinks all that much. Now I'm looking at this though and I'm like, oh, I should do like something with that. And then I look into this too and I'm like, okay, I feel like there's so many like looks now that are just popping out in my head, but there are some multi-chromes in this palette, specifically like this shadow, that are just not what I am comfortable using on my eyes, not what I find to be flattering on my eyes. And then on top of that, there's just a bunch of like bright reds and pinks, which is not my everyday reach. Still think the quality is fantastic. It's just not a color story that speaks to me. Next up, I have my Terra Moon Space Chemistry eyeshadow palette, and I was super excited about this because I have loved Terra Moon's. Like, I own many of their singles and I love their singles. What I've found and what I've realized though is that typically I've reached for Terra Moon singles on my inner corner as like a really beautiful pop rather than all over the lid. This was a pricey palette, and I'm going to start out by saying the matte shadows in here are absolute garbage. Like, they are not good. And they're browns. Like, what happened here? So much kick up and then they like blend away into nothing. And then the metallic shadows in here just don't last all that long on the eyes. I feel like I get a solid like 4 to 6 hours of wear, and beyond that I really feel like they become really lackluster and they just are not punchy in the way that I want them to be, in the way that they first apply to the eyes. So I had to rank this one low because of the longevity issues. Beautiful shadows, but in terms of like quality, longevity and quality, not super solid. And that was, I want to say, $88. In that similar vein, the next palette I have to talk about is the Lethal Cosmetics. Is this the Midnight Serenade? I feel like I was saying that and then I got it wrong and I realized I don't know which one this is. This is from Lethal, as I said, and I was super excited about this palette because I think the color story is beautiful. I was very excited about like the teal blue brown. I was excited about the shade Starlit up here, which has a bit of a like white and blue shift. Enchantress is stunning on the eyes. The mattes are decent. Like, they're not excellent, but they're good. I shouldn't say decent, they're good. There was, I can't remember which shade. There was one look that I did with this and I was getting like a little bit of muddying. I might have been using the shade Requiem. That definitely could have been a me thing. But for me, again, with this one, I did not find that the metallics stayed super metallic on the eyes past like 6 hours. I remember specifically one day I wore a look to work and I used Enchantress on the eyes, got so many compliments right when I went into work, and then towards the end of the day I was like, where did all of my eyeshadow go? So that was a little bit disappointing. I still think this palette is beautiful, and if I'm just like filming and not like planning to wear my makeup all day, this is a palette that I would reach for because I think that I can get some stunning looks out of it. But in terms of that look lasting all day, I just don't think it's here. I have the next 3 palettes I all got in PR. They're all Alter Ego palettes, and I was really struggling in the order that I wanted to rank these ones because I do actually really enjoy these. I think the quality is good. Alter Ego has a great matte formula, and their metallics, they have some really beautiful sparkly shadows, I will say as well. But next I have the Mist Haven palette. And this is a dupe to the Huda Beauty Grunge palette. I actually like the way that the Alter Ego palette is laid out a little bit more than I like how the Huda Beauty one is laid out. For me, in my mind, it just like works a little bit better. Mattes, excellent quality. This is a magnetic palette, so you can take these out, you can rearrange them, you can create your own custom palettes. And the shade Cluster and Twinkle are such beautiful sparkly shadows. I highly recommend this. I just am more excited about some of the palettes ranking above this. Same thing for the Sundown palette. I highly recommend this palette, especially if you were thinking about, I believe this is a dupe to the Natasha Denona My Dream. Love the way that this one is laid out. When I first got this, I could not figure out what this palette was a dupe for, and I was like, maybe Alter Ego is like starting to come out with their own color stories. I was like, I'm kind of into this one, and then it hit me. I think this is so beautiful. I again like the way that this is laid out even more than the Natasha Denona one. Something about the way that it works from like light to dark just in my mind works a little bit better for me. And again, some of the sparkly shadows, like the shade Afterglow is so beautiful, and this shade Prism actually is so shifty. It has like a purple to a green gold sort of flip to it. I was really impressed by that shadow as well. And by the way, the Alter Ego like packaging too is really weighty. Like I feel like Alter Ego kind of crushes it. And then right above that, I have the Daylight palette, which is the dupe to the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude. I picked this one, like this one ranked the highest because it has the most like sparkly shadows. I will say I do have a little bit of hard panning on the shade Sunlight and Mist, but I do use my fingers with the majority of my metallic shadows just in any palette now. Now granted, I don't get hard pan in every single palette, but I have gone in to use this past like multiple times. Like it has hard pan and I've gone in to use it again, and I haven't had any issues with it not performing or applying on the eyes, but I definitely do want to point that out. Beautiful palette. My one complaint with the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude was I didn't love the like peachy shadows. Like I wish we had almost just committed to being this cool toned color story, and I would say the same about this, but I do really like having this in my collection. The nice thing about this palette is I can travel with this one with a little bit more confidence just because it's less expensive than the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude, and the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude is a color story that I would want to travel with. So that is a huge positive in this one. Next up, I have the Danessa Myricks Groundworks Blooming Romance palette. Now I will say I have not used almost this entire top row. I have not used. I bought this because I fell in love with the Danessa Myricks Groundworks Original. I use it every single day on my brows, and I have been dyeing my hair red the majority of this year. So I was like, okay, perfect. I can use some of these for my brows. And I just find the original Groundworks to be such a utilitarian style of palette. It's just a workhorse. It is like a tool in my makeup kit. So I wanted to have this as well. I think I'll get more use out of this in like February when I actually am reaching for more of those rosy tones. That is the only reason I'm ranking this lower. I just haven't used this one a ton, but I still think this adds so much value to a makeup collection, and I would highly recommend if you think you would get use out of those shades. Then I have the Nomad Cosmetics Chicago Speakeasy palette. I enjoyed this palette. I will say I have been a critic of the Nomad formula in the past. I don't think that their formula is perfect. I still have little things I could nitpick about this, but I think that this was a significant step up than like even the Okavango Safari palette, where I found that those matte shadows were just and the shimmers were extremely hard pressed and just not the easiest to use. I am really impressed with the formula of the entire row of shimmer shades. I think they are stunning on the eyes. The shade Gin Ricky is this really beautiful shifty duochrome shade. I really like that, and I really like these two shadows as well. I did find that the matte shadows actually have much more kick up than the other palettes, which I actually prefer. I actually prefer a little more kick up to something super hard pressed. So I feel like this was a huge step up for Nomad compared to what I've tried, and I think this palette is decent. You know, it's not my favorite, but it's also a color story. Like I like that we have purples, greens, and these like honestly like neutral and warm browns. So I'm happy that I bought that. All right, next up I have the Huda Beauty Icy Nude eyeshadow palette. I will say I look at this and I'm like, kind of looks really boring, but I've created some looks that I really enjoy. Like I love Diamond Dew, VVS, Iced Out, Aurora, and Platinum. There are some of the metallic shadows in here that I think are so beautiful on the eyes. Really give like this punchy like snow globe princess sort of finish to it, and I think it's beautiful. I do think there are some shadows that like I feel like the color story is just a little bit uninspired. Supposedly this is the last large eyeshadow palette that Huda Beauty is doing, and I look at this and I'm kind of like, did she just like give up? I don't know, did she just like give up? Like Like we have, I don't know. Like we have this shade on oneself and then Cold Plunge, which I get are two different shadows, but also I'm just like, there's something that just feels a little uninspired about the color story. And then the shade Bling, this glitter, literally feels like I walked outside, scooped up some sand, and then just like it was silver sand and I pressed it in. There is no excuse, especially when you're paying over $65 for an eyeshadow palette. There's literally no excuse for that shadow. So I could not rank that one any higher. All right, this may come as a surprise because I love my Natasha Denona Gold, which I'm not saying I don't really enjoy this palette. This is the Natasha Denona Golden, but I feel like there was a bit of a missed opportunity in this eyeshadow palette. Why did we leave out the shade, the green shade? Why can I not think of the shade right now? There's two green shadows. There's like the teal. Why did we leave those out of the golden palette? Why'd we do that? Even if we wanted to like fully commit to like golden and we left out like the dark tealy blue, why couldn't we have put like the green that's like kind of greeny gold? Why didn't we do that, Natasha? Why? Doesn't make sense. Overall though, solid palette. Like this is something I can see myself reaching into a ton, especially if this is a great companion palette if I want to try and reach for some of my singles that maybe pair better with like a warm tone color story. It's pretty one noted, but there are some solid matte shadows in here. I always talk about loving my matte browns in my gold palette. Now I just have more in the golden, so I really can't complain for that reason. But I am ranking this one a little bit lower because I believe this was a complete missed opportunity. Next up, I have the Blend Bunny Surge eyeshadow palette. And I will say, from like golden on out, like I really struggled. Like I really sat there for a bit and I really struggled to kind of rank these because I was like, I have had so much fun with so many of these palettes, and this is one of those palettes that I just had fun with. I created some looks with this palette so far outside of my comfort zone. I was doing like cut creases, I was doing bright colors, and I was just having so much fun. I think I also attribute this to this summer I created a couple looks with this when the Timberwolves were in the basketball like playoffs, and we did like so well for a Minnesota sports team. And so like there's just fond memories with this palette. There's also a row of neons, which I love neons. I just think neons just add like a spark to life, and even just looking at neon colors makes me happy. So I think that I was so impressed with the Blend Bunny matte formula. Blends so easily, especially for like more colorful shadows. I will say I'm a shimmer girl at heart. Like I love shimmers. So honestly, if we had had like 2 rows of shimmers and 1 less row of mattes, I think I would have loved it even more. But I'm very happy with this, and Blend Bunny is definitely one of those brands that I am interested in trying more from. Next up, I have the first Cosmic Beauty or Cosmic Brushes palette in the entire ranking. So if that tells you anything about how impressed I am with the brand. This I know came out last year, but I purchased it at the tail end of 2023, so I just got around to testing it at the very beginning of this year, and I was so impressed with the quality. I feel like this was a very like raved about brand. A lot of people, like this was getting a lot of buzz, and in my mind I'm like, okay, is it just like an influencer brand? Like I feel like sometimes Nomad is, because I'm like, okay, people rave about this formula, but like really there's better. It's like, is it just that? But no, the quality in the Cosmic Beauty like palettes is so good. I'm so impressed with not only their mattes but also their metallics. I love the shade Ambient up here. One of like, I hate to say one of my favorite shadows in my entire collection because I feel like I have so many in my mind, but I love a shadow like this, and I was so impressed with that shadow. I also loved the shade Antique. I think Whisper is such a fun purple, and like something about these two together, like very pretty. So impressed. I definitely want to pick up, there's I think a couple more Cosmic Brushes palettes I want to pick up, and now that I'm not going to be like spending my money on NC Rain, it just frees up dollars for me to like be out here supporting, you know, other brands, which is exciting. Next up, I have the Fantasy Cosmetica Enchanted Autumn palette, and I will say I really enjoyed this palette. This is the second palette I purchased from Fantasy Cosmetica. There's a third coming up, but Fantasy Cosmetica is another brand that I would be interested in picking up more palettes from. What I love about this palette, I love these 3 shadows. I did a look that I loved with those 3 shadows. My only complaint with this is sometimes I look at the color story and I'm just like a little bit lost on what to do in order to create a full look. I don't love a rosy shadow, like I said. So like I could have done with something, maybe even like just a dark brown here. But again, it's not my color story, not my palette. The shade Emerald here, this green is so stunning. But this silver with like a hint of blue, it is so bright and shiny on the eyes. Like I'm literally obsessed with that shade. Another palette that came out at the end of last year that I just finished testing at the beginning of this year was the Bella Beauté Bar Angles of Illumination. Listen, I love a blue and I love a shimmer, and I get like I can't create a full look, at least not me personally, with this palette, but for a companion palette and for just a bunch of shimmery blues and just special blues, because Bella Beauté Bar makes such a special shadow, I loved this. I also really loved the shade Sunlight down here. This is like kind of a teal green gold sort of shifty shadow. Another like one of those like one of my favorite shadows in my entire collection sort of situations. We've got a couple of really beautiful kind of blue brown shadows, which I love a blue brown, so huge fan of this one. And then another Bella Beauté Bar palette, I have the Strange and Unusual palette, which I finally picked up this year. And I will say for me, this is more of a color story thing. Bella Beauté Bar is now my number one, like for certain, my number one eyeshadow brand, eyeshadow formula. They make such a special shadow in my opinion. So I love this palette for the special shadows. But I will say in terms of like my perfect color story, this definitely is not my perfect color story. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I need to create a look though with this and this. Like I feel like that would be so fun. It's kind of giving, oh my gosh, like motocross, like jacket. I don't know, something about that. I'm like, I kind of want to create a look with that. But when I look at this, I'm like, ooh, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? I did create an Iowa State football. Iowa State? Iowa State. Not the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa State Cyclones. An Iowa State look with that, and I loved it. All right, next up, this is a palette that I have. This is, what number are we? I think we're 30? Number 30. I have not finished my testing process for this. This is the Blend Bunny Robert Walsh Divination palette, and I will say I actually still have quite a few shadows left to use in this, but I love this color story. I like that we have 2 rows of shimmers. I like that we go from light to dark, and I'm so excited to continue to test this. I loved the look that I created using the neutral row, and I'm excited about this one. I'm excited about the color story. I feel like I'm somewhat familiar with the Blend Bunny formula. Like this performs very similarly to the Surge palette, so I haven't had any issues with the quality. I also love just some of the fun pops of color in here, so that's why I am ranking this one at 30, but I have not used every shadow in this palette, just so you know. Another palette that I have not yet used every shadow, this is the newest palette to my collection. It is the Bella Beauté Bar Realm of Fairies palette. You know, if I were to finish my testing process, maybe I would even rank this higher, because for a blue lover, like this was made for a blue lover. And there's this beautiful, like, oh, there's some beautiful mixes of like periwinkles. Loved the look. I've done 1 or 2 looks with this. 2, I think. Loved both looks that I created. I will say, I think these 2 shadows seem a bit repetitive. They kind of have that like UV blue purple sort of finish to it. In the pan, they don't look the same, but like swatched out, they look kind of similar. The shade Reflection is so freaking pretty, and Illusion, I mean, give me a little bit longer to test this and maybe that'll be ranking higher. Then I have the Simply Posh Coastal palette. I also have not used every single shadow in this palette. I haven't used the blue mattes yet. Everything else I have used, and I am so excited about Simply Posh. I'm definitely interested in picking up their Aurora Lights palettes. I really like the way that they lay their palettes out cohesively. I think it makes sense, especially for someone like me who struggles sometimes to put a look together in my head. I really like the way they lay their palettes out. I think that their metallic shades are really, really special, and I'm very excited to continue to try more palettes from the brand because I was really impressed with the quality. This is so difficult because this is my most used palette in my entire collection. I literally use this every single day, literally. It's my Janessa Myrick's Groundwork palette. I got this in my lucky bag at the beginning of the year, but I really mostly just use this for my brows. I have taken this traveling with me every time I've traveled though, and I do use it when I travel because it's a very tool-like palette, like a very utilitarian, very, like, this is perfect for travel. This is just perfect to have. But I'm just so excited about some of the other palettes, some of the special shadows in the other palettes. That's why I had to rank this one where it's at. But in terms of like the palette that gets the most use, it's this one. All right, next up, I have another Nomad palette, and this is the most recent launch that they've come out with that I've purchased, and this is my favorite palette to date that they have come out with. I'm very much impressed with the improvements that I feel like they have made in their formula. It's not my perfect formula yet by any means, but I love the color story of this. Like I said, I love blues, so I like that we have a row of blues. I like that we have the browns. We've got warm shadows in here. I like that we have this cool toned taupey shadow. I don't know, there's something about this color story I really enjoy. I created a cool toned, like neutral blue look that I wore to work that I was perfectly comfortable wearing to work, and it just made me so happy because I love blues so much. And when I can incorporate a blue look into like my everyday, like feel comfortable wearing it to like everyday events, that just makes me even more happy. So this has a special place in my heart. I really enjoy this one. Next, I have the Glaminatrix Barely Basic palette. I have raved about Glaminatrix palettes on my channel. I feel like they nail it when it comes to like basic color stories, but making them like not basic. I love the way that this palette is laid out. There's so many different options. We've got purpley mauves, we've got like warm brownie orange, green, and then we have like a cool toned row as well. 2 rows of their like special shadows, which their special shadows are so silky to the touch. I wouldn't even call them buttery. I would literally say like they feel like silk to the touch. They are so nice, very shifty, very beautiful on the eyes. Really impressed with this palette. Then I have another Cosmic Beauty palette. This is the Cool Chills palette. Again, I love blues, and I really enjoyed my time with this palette. I like that we have a row of more like neutral, like more neutral, like everyday. Then we have this really beautiful kind of purple row with this really fun like bubblegum pinky purple shadow. We've got a silver, we've got a black. And then we have 2 rows of blues, one being like blue, one being kind of a periwinkle blue. I think this is such a fun color story. It's that excellent quality from Cosmic Beauty. I had no issues with quality with any of these. The metallics are so punchy on the eyes. Super impressed with this beautiful palette. The eyeshadow palette that I have on my eyes today is the Just a Taste palette from Unearthly. And I just finished my testing process for this. I will say if I spent more time with this, this is one I could see potentially even being ranked a little bit higher. I am really excited now. I feel like I'll have a few more like makeup dollars freed up to purchase more from Unearthly as well, which has been a brand on my radar. I think they are one of those indie brands that really does have such an excellent quality formula. Specifically, they're like metallic special shadows. Right now I have these shadows on the bottom row. This is my look, and then I use this a little bit to deepen out the outer part. This is like one of my favorite style of shadows when we're talking about like, I love an ethereal like pink with a blue sparkle. And I will say my one complaint with Bella Beauté Bar is because their shadows are so punchy, sometimes I get creasing, like I definitely do. But with this palette and with Unearthly's formula, I feel like it's a little bit smoother, a little bit less, it's a little bit thinner, and it doesn't crease as heavily. I have no creasing with this. I love the way that this look turned out, and it's Vikings game day, so we're wearing purple. Really impressed with this and very excited to keep playing with this. I didn't fully commit to like a red look, but I'm very interested in doing something with like this top row. Something about like this Tetris symbol, like right here, looks like, I feel like I look into this palette and the options are endless in terms of looks that I have in mind. Like I feel very creatively inspired when looking into this palette. The only thing I would love out of this palette is like, and not that it really would fit the color story, but like I love a blue, so like there's not really blues here, but like we've got reds, we've got yellows, we've got greens, we've got purple. Like I don't know that I can think of another palette that I look into that I feel as creatively inspired. I think of like Blend Bunny, like yes, maybe there's more colors, but I don't necessarily know how I want to piece a look together. I look at this and I'm like, okay, I'm creating looks already in my mind with some of these, and I feel very inspired by this. Next up, kind of similarly, 2 Vamp palettes, one after the other. This is the Bella Beauté Bar Vamp palette. I was blown away by this palette. When they teased they were coming out with a Vamp palette, I was like, ooh, that's probably gonna be a lot of reds and maybe blacks, and I probably won't use it that much, but I'm buying it because it's Bella Beauté Bar. And then they released the like photos of what it looked like, and I was like, oh, only 1 row of reds and there's blues, like heck yes. And I got this and I created one of my favorite looks this year with the reds, and it made me kind of want to be a red girly, not gonna lie. Every shadow in this palette, I'm like, literally drooling. Skin of a Killer is such a special lid topper shadow that just adds the most beautiful sparkle to a look. Claudia, whew, for like a mid-toned, just silvery blue, like one of the blues in my dreams, I swear. And just the uniqueness of some of these red shadows, there is something so special about this palette. I absolutely love this. We're getting to like, I love the palettes. Yes, we're into the top 12 now. Okay, I have the Natasha Denona I Need a Warm eyeshadow palette. I feel like in my mind I'm a cool tone girly, but this year I was like leaning into the warm tones, and I definitely liked warm tone browns on me way more than like a cool tone brown look. I think because I love blues so much, I'm like, ooh, I'm a cool tone girly. But then when it comes to my browns, give me all the warm browns. And so I loved this. I actually feel like it's more like warm to neutral browns. Like it's not just all warm browns, but there is definitely some variety amongst the metallic shadows. Like it's not this one noted palette in my opinion. I feel like there's some variety, and I love like all of the metallics. Homey is such a beautiful like champagne-y, just like punchy metallic on the eyes. There's quite a variety of like textures and tones in this palette, and I was really impressed with this one from Natasha. Then I have another one from Bella Beauté Bar. This is the Recently De-Influenced palette, and this actually came out last year. I didn't buy it because I looked at this and I was like, yeah, definite skip. That's not a color story that really speaks to me. I also was not as familiar with the Bella Beauté Bar formula at the time, but I saw Brittany Ray swatch, her swatches kill it. If you guys do not follow Brittany Ray on Instagram, well, if you want to save yourself some money, maybe don't, but she just always has the best swatches. She's also going through a lot like health-wise right now, so go support her, please. I love her page, and she deserves all the love, all the support, especially like not especially right now, like anytime, but like she's going through it right now, so you should go follow her. She posted like she had recently purchased this, and she's like, oh, I'm so mad that I skipped this. And I was looking at her swatches and I was like, are we sure that's the Recently De-Influenced palette? You look at this and it just looks kind of like all these shades look the same. No, when this is swatched out, there's so much variety, so many different depths, and just one of my favorite looks of the entire year is with that, like this quad or this little L of shadows, or maybe it's, what is it, this yeah, love it. Love this palette. So glad that I purchased this. That brings us to our top 10 eyeshadow palettes. Top 10, right? Maybe we're at 11. I don't know. Hopefully I'm keeping track on the screen. But I'm kind of surprised by this one. A little bit surprised. But I've been recently using this more to finish my testing process. And I do still have a few shadows in here to use. I have like this quad of pinks that I haven't used. And then I also have these two shadows and these two, because I don't always love like a tealy shadow. First of all, this is a very large palette. I wish we could have maybe like condensed down a little bit, but like this green, this cool tone pink, this shadow right here, this green pinky shadow, the entire top row for like a neutral look, this holographic shade. Bella Beauté Bar, they're just doing something different with their metallics, and I am here for it. I love something just intense and punchy on the lids, and Bella Beauté Bar delivers. I have been so into this. I love greens though, so that's like a piece of it. I do love greens, and I did a look with the shade Imagine and Oasis, and like, wow, I was very impressed. This little six pan from Diveroon, I told you I feel like they need to work on their mattes, but their metallics, they know what they're doing. I feel like I saw that they might be coming out with another like metallic, just like all shimmer palette. I feel like maybe I saw that. I could be very wrong on that. And I was like, I am here for their little companion palettes. This is the Dewdrops palette. It's so cute. And I found myself, after I had tested all the shadows, I was like reaching into this palette to add just a little bit more of a pop to like a boring look. Or like I would be going to work and I'd be like, I feel like something a little bit more fun today. And I would reach into specifically usually one of the bottom shadows, but in the summer, the shade Drip, this beautiful yellow. You guys, this palette is so cute. Such a good companion palette. I freaking love this one. I thought this was so good, and I would love to see them, like if they only came out with these little 6-pan companion palettes, I would be like all here for it personally. Next up I have the Fantasy Cosmetica Harvest of Souls palette. Wow, am I just so impressed with this palette. First of all, I love the way that this palette is laid out. In my mind, I just see this palette in quads. I love the way that they laid this out, because if you want to play around with color but maybe you're uncomfortable playing around with color, I feel like this really just kind of guides you and helps you. These two blues, excellent. Some of my, like this blue, one of my favorite mid-tone cobalt blue metallics I have ever used. Souls layered on top of that is so beautiful. I love this like lighter lavender shade. I love this bright lighter green shadow. Oh, this palette is excellent, absolutely excellent. Fantasy Cosmetica has a wonderful formula, and I was so impressed with this. Okay, it was so difficult to decide like my top 5, so I'm on to number 6. And this pains me because I'm like, this palette is so good. It's so good. It's so good. But my top 5 is my top 5, and I'm locked in. So number 6 is my Danessa Myricks Lightwork Volume 6. You guys know I have raved about Danessa Myricks. Danessa Myricks is like what got me into a special shadow. The Lightwork Volume 3 is what got me into a special shadow. When I first bought that palette, I'm not kidding you guys, I would literally sit out on my patio and just swatch that and like shift my arm in the sun and just like, that's literally not even a lie. I was just so enamored with the shadows. I would do that multiple days in a week. I swear it was like what was bringing me joy in 2022, if that tells you anything about my 2022. But love Danessa Myricks. I have a full dedicated review on this palette. The packaging in this is the most innovative thing I think like that has come out in like for palettes in my opinion ever. These are broken up into little six, not quads, but like little 6-pans. Every shadow's metallic or magnetic, so you can swap it out, you can rearrange things. The lid has this, which has a mirror, so you can literally like, it's the coolest packaging I have ever seen. I love the way that this is laid out. Again, you can rearrange it however you want. Unlike other Danessa Myricks palettes, these have these like satin shadows, so I was able to create full looks with this palette, and I had so much fun with this. I had so much fun with this palette. But in terms of just creating like full looks that I really feel comfortable with and I'm excited about, the top 5 just were like a little bit, like I'm just like a little bit more, but I absolutely love this palette. Coming in at number 5, it is the Flying Fiddles. It is Flying Fiddles. This is a palette that came into my life early this year. It is from Adept. I believe this is the only Adept palette that I purchased this year. Ooh, I'm freed up for more Adept dollars too, which is exciting. Great quality. Like, I love the selection of mattes and shimmers. The shade Scorpion Grass, this marbled shadow, is so beautiful. One of my favorite looks that I created this year, I created using this palette. I remember being so impressed with the mattes, specifically like loving these 2 mattes up here. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I need to pull this back out again, because just, oh, this is like a spicy neutral palette. We love a spicy neutral. Like, we like to keep it neutral, but just like a pop of just something so special. I was so impressed with this. There's pinks, but not like, these are like the pinks I like. Like, this is probably the fieriest pink that there is, and it's this really beautiful pink to gold to green shifty shadow. Like, I love a shade like that. And then we have these, like, this is kind of like more of like a cool tone, like, is it a champagne, is it a pink? And then we have blues, we have greens. Like, this is so beautiful. Coming in at number 4, another green palette, I have my Cosmic Beauty Undergrowth palette. I again have a full dedicated review to this palette. I will say with this one, the shade Nettle gives me a little bit of issues, and the shade Bark, those two gave me a little bit of issues blending, but nothing major. And I think this is such a special palette, especially in terms of just a green color story. The metallic shimmers in this palette are some of the smoothest, silkiest, and just most special green shadows I've ever come across. Like, if I was like starting to fall out of love with greens and then like just fully lean into blues, this brought me back. This brought me back to being balanced between blue and green for my favorite colors to play with. I just loved this palette. This is something that like I get excited still to reach for, even though I've already finished my testing process for this. It's a palette I think about often, and I just think it's so good. Number 3 is actually my Unearthly Sorcerer's Smoke. I either bought this at the very end of 2023 and didn't start testing until the beginning of this year, or I bought it and it didn't arrive until the beginning of 2024. It is the Unearthly Sorcerer's Smoke, if I didn't say, and I love this because I can create work appropriate looks with this, and I can also create such a punchy look to film with. I love the metallic shadows in here. The shade Sorceress is again one of those like pinks that I love. I don't always love a pink, but it's one of those pinks that I love that has a bit of like a golden sort of shift to it. I also love with Unearthly, you can kind of follow the quads if you don't know what to do. Like the palettes are just laid out in a way that just makes sense. And I feel like there's just a variety of different ways you can take this palette. Yes, there's only 12 shadows, but we've got greens. We've got these like deeper shadows with like a bluey sort of shade. We've got these like warmer brown and pink peachy sort of shades. Like there's just such a wide range of places you can take this palette, even though it is only 12 shadows. I was so impressed with this. Okay, pause the video. Let me know what you think number 1 and number 2 is. Let me know what you think. I feel like a lot of you probably already knew what my number 1 was gonna be. I feel like a lot of you probably knew. Number 2 is my Cosmic Beauty Neutrals palette. This is just so good. Just so good. We have got neutral browns. We've got like this cool toned pink shadow up here. We have got this really shifty shadow up here, such a beautiful inner corner highlight. We've got a red to like an orangey gold sort of shifty shadow. We have a champagne metallic. We have yellows, we have mustards, we have golds, we have green, we have purple, like mauvey pinks. I loved the look I created with this bottom row. Loved it. This green right here, Luxe, I was blown away when I used this. One of the most special greens in my entire collection. And I also don't love a gold, but this shade Glitz is such a special gold shade. I honestly should put Glitz, wait, because it's Vikings game day, I feel like I should put Glitz on the bottom here to like add a little bit of gold to the purple and gold. I don't necessarily know that I like, no, it's coming together. I also forgot I sneezed earlier and I meant to like wipe off my mascara on the bottom over here. Oh well. Well, I don't know if you can even see that, but at least we've got purple and gold for Vikings game day now. This was absolutely incredible. I could not recommend Cosmic Beauty enough. And then I feel like many of you already guessed it, but my number 1 is the Poison Garden palette from Bella Vitae Bar. I don't even honestly have words. I don't even honestly have words. First of all, I love the game Plants vs. Zombie, and immediately when I saw the outer packaging, it just reminded me of Plants vs. Zombies, so already it had like a leg up on the competition. But for a grungy girl's dream, okay, truly the shade Poison Ivy, one of my favorite shadows in my entire collection. It is such a stunning, impactful, metallic, blue-brown teal sort of shifty shadow. It's so beautiful. By the way, my daughter's playing games if you can hear her screaming. The shade Angel's Trumpet, especially for like a bronzy summer look with like just like oh my gosh, like a deep matte like smoky eye, and then you want like a just something that makes everybody drool, metallic all over the lid. Angel's Trumpet. I like that we have, I mean, we have like this shade which can lean kind of purple. We have grays, we have blues, we have bright blues, we have purples, we have rosy pinks, we have orange, we have, if I didn't say green, we have mustards, and then we just have some of the most special shadows. Like, I love this. I love this palette so much. It really, like, I knew, like, I started to like lay my palettes out. I already knew this was number 1. Like, I didn't have to like lay everything out and like look at it. I knew that this was number 1, and I knew that this was number 2. Then I kind of had to like open up some of the things at the top to kind of rank them from there. But that, and even if I was ranking my ER palettes, I will say I do still believe this would have been number 1 out of them all. They're just, oh, the shade Poison Ivy, because I'm done with everything, I'll swatch Poison Ivy. Oh my god, I just, like, if I could marry an eyeshadow shade, this is all I would ever need. Everything I would need. Whew. after that though, you guys, that is going to wrap up and conclude today's ranking video. I would love to know what your top favorite palette of the year was and the worst palette you tried this year. Let us know in the comments. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting me and my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in tomorrow's video. Bye.